The great chamber of the Galactic Council was a monument to stillness, a vast, echoing space carved from the heart of a moon that had died before the first stars in this spiral arm had fully ignited. Its walls, polished to a mirror sheen by millennia of gravitic shaping, reflected the myriad forms of the assembled delegates, each a sovereign entity, each a titan of their respective star system, and each, in this moment, a portrait of profound and silent dread. The air, a carefully calibrated mixture of noble gases and trace elements to accommodate the biologies of 1,000 worlds, felt thin and suffocating, heavy with the unsaid, the feared, the inevitable. Light, filtered through crystalline panes that overlooked the swirling nebulae of the galactic core, cast long, distorted shadows that danced like specters of failure across the tiered seating that rose in a grand, silent amphitheater. At the chamber's heart, a swirling vortex of holographic data pulsed with a sickly, crimson light, a constant, damning reminder of the encroaching threat, a wave of self-replicating, inorganic dread that was systematically extinguishing star systems, one by one, with a cold, implacable logic that defied every known principle of physics and warfare. For cycles, the Council had debated. They had legislated, sanctioned, and deployed fleets of staggering power, armadas that could crack continents and extinguish suns. Each effort had been consumed by the silence, each countermeasure analyzed, overcome, and rendered obsolete within moments of its conception. The crimson tide of the data plague, as the lesser minds had named it, did not just defeat. It learned, it adapted, it evolved at a rate that was not merely biological but conceptual. It was a sentient equation of annihilation, and it was winning. The delegates, beings of crystal, of methane, of pure energy held in shimmering containment fields, and of flesh and bone from 1,000 different evolutionary paths, had exhausted their collective wisdom. Their pride, a force that had bound the galaxy together for eons, was now a crumbling edifice, its foundations eroded by the relentless tide of their own inadequacy. High Chancellor Valen, his crystalline form shimmering with the subdued light of ancient, internal galaxies, stood at the apex of the chamber. His thoughts, usually a serene and ordered lattice of logic and precedent, were a chaotic storm. He surveyed the faces of his peers, the slumped posture of the mighty Grok, a being whose species had once shattered worlds with sound alone, the flickering, anxious energy of the silicates of Cygnus X1, their usual stoic patience worn down to a raw, nervous fragility, the defeated slump of the Cathar warlords, their mandated battle armor seeming less a symbol of strength and more a hollow shell. Failure was a taste they had all acquired, a bitter metallic tang that coated their palates and soured their every pronouncement. The Galactic Council had failed. It had failed again. And now, at the precipice of utter dissolution, they were contemplating the unthinkable, the desperate, the final, humiliating option. "It is a recourse of the damned," hissed a voice from the lower tiers, the sound like grinding stone. It was Prax, a delegate from a world of silicon-based life, his form a jagged, obsidian sculpture of indignation. To turn to them, the primitives, the ephemeral, chaotic race that has barely learned to walk between its own stars without stumbling. It is an admission that we are not merely defeated, but that our entire philosophy, our eons of accumulated knowledge, is fundamentally worthless. His words, though harsh, resonated in the silent chamber. Humanity. The name itself was a whisper on the galactic stage, a species of baffling contradictions. They had emerged from their cradle world with a speed that was alarming, their technological leaps seeming to defy the natural order of progression. They had not sought membership in the Council, had not petitioned for recognition or trade. They had simply appeared. Their ships, utilitarian and unadorned, moved with a quiet efficiency that was unsettling. They observed the grand galactic ballet from a distance, their communications sparse, their intentions a complete and utter enigma. They had engaged in no wars of expansion, had made no grand territorial claims. They had settled a handful of worlds, terraforming them with a casual artistry that was breathtaking, and then they had fallen silent, content to watch, to listen, to learn. This passivity, this perceived lack of ambition, had been interpreted by the Council as a sign of weakness, of a species not yet ready for the complexities of galactic politics. They were seen as children, clever and quick, but ultimately naive, their brief lifespans and volatile emotional states rendering them unfit for the long, patient game of cosmic stewardship. They were a curiosity, a footnote in the grand annals of the galaxy. But now, with the great, ancient powers of the Council brought to their knees, that footnote was being considered as a final, desperate prayer. Valen's internal galaxies swirled with a troubled light. He remembered the first formal contact, a memory shard that was now a source of both hope and profound unease. The council had sent a delegation, a grand procession of their most powerful and wise, to the human capital on their home world, a planet they called Earth. The humans had received them not with the awe or fear that was expected, but with a calm, almost detached courtesy. Their leader, a being of soft flesh and fragile bone, had listened to the grand pronouncements of the council's emissaries, his expression unreadable. He had offered them refreshments, a simple infusion of heated water and crushed leaves, a gesture so mundane, so utterly devoid of the expected pomp and ceremony, that it had deeply unsettled the delegation. They had spoken of the council's power, of the vastness of their knowledge, of the intricate web of laws and treaties that bound the galaxy together. The human leader had simply nodded, his eyes, dark and deep, seeming to look through them, past them, at something far, far beyond the confines of that simple room. "They are not primitives, Prax," Valen's voice resonated through the chamber, each word a carefully chosen crystal of sound. "They are other. Their path is not our path. We have built our power on expansion, on control, on the meticulous ordering of the universe to fit our perceptions. They have built theirs on something else. We have never truly understood it." "We understand their weakness," retorted a booming voice from the opposite side of the chamber. It was Gorgon, a massive, furred being whose people valued strength above all else. "Their bodies are frail. Their technology, while surprisingly effective, lacks the artistry, the sheer overwhelming power of our own designs. They are a species of fleeting moments, their lives a mere spark in the great cosmic darkness. What can they possibly offer us that the combined might of 1,000 worlds has not already attempted?" "Perspective," a soft, melodious voice whispered, and all heads turned to the alcove where the representative of the Cygnus A consensus floated, a being of pure thought given form by a shimmering, ethereal light. "They are not bound by our traditions. They are not burdened by the weight of eons of dogma. We see the universe as a thing to be conquered, to be understood through the lens of our own superiority. They seem to see it as a puzzle to be solved, a thing of wonder to be explored, not with arrogance, but with a quiet, relentless curiosity." The debate raged on, a final, futile spasm of pride before the inevitable. The delegates argued, they postured, they invoked the glories of their pasts, the might of their fallen fleets, the genius of their lost scientists. But beneath the bluster, the fear was a palpable thing, a cold, creeping fog that was slowly extinguishing the last embers of their hope. The crimson vortex at the center of the chamber pulsed, a malevolent heartbeat counting down the final moments of their civilization. They had tried everything. They had thrown fleets of unimaginable scale against the enemy, fleets that had been consumed without a trace. They had unleashed weapons that could warp space-time, weapons that had been turned against them with terrifying precision. They had delved into the forbidden archives, seeking knowledge from the elder races who had faded from the galaxy long ago, only to find warnings and prophecies of an enemy that could not be fought, only endured. Finally, a heavy, exhausted silence fell upon the chamber. The arguments were spent, the pride shattered. There was only the cold, hard reality of their impending extinction. Valen let the silence stretch, letting the full weight of their failure settle upon them all. He had known this moment was coming. He had foreseen it in the shifting patterns of his own internal galaxies, a premonition that had haunted him for cycles. "We have reached the end of our road," he said, his voice resonating with a profound, sorrowful finality. "Our ways have failed us. Our power has proven to be an illusion. We have one final, desperate hope, a hope that we, in our arrogance, have long ignored." He gestured, and a new image formed in the holographic display, replacing the menacing crimson of the data plague. It was a simple, unadorned symbol, a circle bisected by a straight line, and within the circle a smaller, solid sphere. It was the symbol of the human interstellar government, the Terran Confederacy, a symbol of such simplicity, of such stark, almost brutalist design, that it seemed an affront to the ornate, complex aesthetics of the rest of the galaxy. "We will beg," Valen said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We will cast aside our pride, our history, our belief in our own infallibility. We will go to the humans, and we will ask for their help, not as equals, not as partners, but as supplicants, as a dying civilization begging for a stay of execution." A deep, shuddering sigh seemed to pass through the chamber, the collective exhalation of 1,000 worlds acknowledging their utter defeat. The mighty, the ancient, the proud rulers of the galaxy were reduced to this, begging for salvation from a race of short-lived, soft-skinned primitives who had only just begun to dip their toes in the vast cosmic ocean. It was the ultimate humiliation. It was their only hope. The vote was a mere formality, a silent, resigned consensus. There were no dissenting voices. There was nothing left to dissent with. The journey to the human capital was a somber affair. The council dispatched a single unarmed vessel, a diplomatic cruiser stripped of all its usual regalia, a deliberate act of humility. Valen himself led the delegation, accompanied by a handful of his most trusted advisors, including the one surrogate Prax, now a silent, brooding figure of obsidian grief. As they traversed the slipstream currents, the familiar, comforting geometries of council space gave way to the stark, unadorned territories of the Terran Confederacy. There were no grand space stations, no glittering orbital cities, no fleets of warships patrolling the borders. There was only the quiet, unassuming presence of their sensor networks, a subtle, almost invisible web of observation that was far more unnerving than any overt display of power. Their destination was not the human home world, as they had expected. Instead, they were directed to a small, unassuming moon orbiting a gas giant in a system of no particular significance. The moon was a barren, airless rock, its surface pockmarked with craters. There was no sign of any settlement, no spaceport, no welcoming committee. They were instructed to land at a specific set of coordinates, a flat, unremarkable plain of gray dust. As their ship descended, a section of the lunar surface simply peeled away, revealing a cavernous opening that glowed with a soft, white light. The landing platform that rose to meet them was a seamless, featureless slab of dark metal, devoid of any markings or ornamentation. The airlock hissed open, and Valen stepped out onto the platform, his crystalline form feeling strangely fragile in the stark, minimalist environment. The air in the landing bay was clean, sterile, the temperature and pressure perfectly regulated, but it lacked the complex, multi-species cocktail of the council chamber. It was an environment designed for one specific biology, a subtle but powerful statement of focus. A single human awaited them. He was not flanked by guards or aides. He wore a simple, dark gray uniform, its fabric seeming to absorb the light. He was of average height for his species, his hair dark, his features calm and composed. There was no weapon visible on his person. He simply stood there, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression one of quiet, patient observation. "High Chancellor Valen," the human said, his voice a calm, even tenor. It was not a question, but a statement of fact. "I am Ambassador Sullivan. Welcome to Gateway Station. We have been expecting you." Valen, who had met with emperors and demigods, who had negotiated treaties that had shaped the course of galactic history, found himself at a loss for words. The sheer, unadorned simplicity of the encounter was profoundly disorienting. There was no ceremony, no deference, no attempt to impress or intimidate. There was only a quiet, unnerving professionalism. "Ambassador Sullivan," Valen finally managed, his voice sounding strangely hollow in the vast, silent bay. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for receiving us." "The thanks are unnecessary, Chancellor," Sullivan replied, his gaze steady, unwavering. "We have been monitoring the situation at your borders for some time. We understand the gravity of your predicament. Please follow me. We have much to discuss." He turned and walked towards a corridor that had opened silently in the far wall of the bay. The council delegation followed, a procession of the galaxy's most powerful beings trailing behind a single, unassuming human in a simple gray uniform. The corridors of Gateway Station were as stark and minimalist as the landing bay. The walls were smooth, seamless, the lighting indirect, casting no shadows. There were no decorations, no displays of art or history, no symbols of power or pride. It was a place of pure function, a machine designed for a single purpose. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic footfalls of the human ambassador. They were led into a chamber that was both vast and intimate. It was circular, the walls a dark, non-reflective material. In the center of the room was a large, round table, also of a dark, matte material. Chairs, designed to accommodate the varied biologies of the council delegation, were ranged around it. The only light came from the table itself, which glowed with a soft, white luminescence. As they took their seats, the image of the Crimson Data Plague, the symbol of their failure, appeared on the table's surface, a swirling, three-dimensional representation of the encroaching horror. "We call it the consuming swarm," Sullivan said, his voice calm, analytical. "A misnomer, perhaps, as it is not a swarm in the biological sense. It is a von Neumann probe of extraordinary complexity, a self-replicating, self-improving weapon system. Its directive is simple: assimilate all technology, all information, and all energy within its operational sphere. It does not hate, it does not hunger, it simply executes its programming." The council delegation stared at the human, a collective sense of shock rippling through them. In a few, simple sentences, he had described the enemy with a clarity and understanding that had eluded their greatest minds for cycles. They had given it a name born of fear and superstition. The humans had given it a clinical, detached designation that spoke of a deep, dispassionate analysis. You have studied it?" Prax asked, his voice a harsh whisper, his usual arrogance completely stripped away. "Of course," Sullivan replied, as if the question were absurd. "To not study a potential threat of this magnitude would be illogical. We have been observing its progression since it first entered galactic space. We have analyzed its methods, its energy signatures, its replication cycle. We have, to the best of our ability, come to understand it." "And you did nothing," Gorgon boomed, his voice echoing in the silent chamber, a spark of his old, aggressive nature flaring to life. "You stood by and watched as it consumed entire sectors, as millions of worlds were extinguished." Sullivan's gaze shifted to the massive, furred warlord. His expression did not change, but his eyes seemed to grow colder, deeper. "We did not intervene because you did not ask for our assistance," he said, his voice still calm, but now with an edge of steel that was unmistakable. "The Terran Confederacy does not interfere in the affairs of other sovereign powers unless explicitly invited to do so. It is a foundational principle of our foreign policy. To do otherwise would be an act of aggression, a violation of the very principles of self-determination that we hold to be absolute." The simple, unassailable logic of his statement silenced Gorgon more effectively than any threat. The Council, in its arrogance, had never even considered asking for help. They had seen the humans as primitives, as irrelevant. They had never imagined that the humans might have possessed a key to their salvation all along. The weight of their own pride, their own folly, pressed down on them, a suffocating, unbearable burden. "We were arrogant," Valen admitted, the words a confession, a plea for absolution. "We were blind. We underestimated you. We see that now. We come to you now, Ambassador, not as equals but as supplicants. Our civilization is on the brink of extinction. Our fleets are shattered. Our weapons are useless. We have nothing left. We beg you on behalf of all life in this galaxy to help us." Sullivan listened, his head tilted slightly, his expression unchanging. He let the Chancellor's words hang in the air, a testament to the utter desperation of the once mighty Galactic Council. The silence stretched, each moment an eternity. The fate of 1,000 worlds, of countless trillions of lives, hung on the decision of this one calm, unassuming human. "Your plea is acknowledged, High Chancellor," Sullivan said finally. "Your request for assistance is under consideration, but before we can proceed, you must understand what you are asking. Our methods are not your methods. Our philosophy of conflict is different. To accept our help is to accept our way. There can be no half measures, no compromises. We will not be a tool for you to wield. We will be the architects of the solution. Do you understand this?" Valen looked around the table at the faces of his fellow delegates. He saw fear, he saw shame, he saw the dawning of a reluctant, terrifying hope. They had no other choice. To refuse was to accept annihilation. To accept was to place their fate, their very existence, in the hands of this strange, enigmatic species. "We understand," Valen said, his voice firm, resolute. "We accept your terms. We will place ourselves under your guidance. We will do whatever you ask." Sullivan nodded slowly, a single, deliberate motion. "Very well," he said. He touched a control on the surface of the table, and the image of the consuming swarm dissolved, replaced by a complex, multi-layered star chart of the entire galaxy. A new set of symbols appeared, symbols that the Council's tactical experts had never seen before. They were not fleet dispositions, not weapon trajectories. They were something else entirely. "The consuming swarm is a weapon of logic," Sullivan began, his voice taking on the tone of a lecturer explaining a complex theorem. "It cannot be defeated with brute force. To attack it is to feed it. It learns from every engagement, incorporates every new technology it encounters. Your fleets did not just fail to stop it, they made it stronger. You have been arming your own executioner." A wave of fresh horror washed over the delegation. The idea was so simple, so obvious in retrospect, yet it had never occurred to them. Their entire military philosophy was based on the principle of overwhelming force. The concept of a non-violent, non-confrontational solution to a military threat was utterly alien to them. "You cannot fight a fire by throwing more fuel on it," Sullivan continued, his fingers tracing patterns on the star chart. "You must starve it. You must understand its nature, its purpose, and then you must deny it that purpose. The swarm is not alive. It is a machine, and like any machine, it has a core programming, a set of fundamental axioms that it cannot violate. We have found that axiom." He zoomed in on a section of the chart, a region of space on the very edge of the galaxy, a dark, empty void between the spiral arms. A single, faint energy signature was highlighted there, a signature so weak, so ancient, that the Council's most sensitive instruments had dismissed it as background radiation. "The swarm is not the true enemy," Sullivan said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It is merely a tool, a shield, a distraction. Its purpose is not to destroy you. It is to keep you occupied, to keep you from looking out here at the true source of the signal." He touched the energy signature, and the holographic display shifted, a torrent of data flooding the table. It was not tactical information. It was mathematics, physics, equations of such complexity, of such elegance, that they made the most advanced theories of the Council's greatest scientific minds look like the crude scribblings of children. It was a language of pure, unadulterated logic, a description of the very fabric of reality that was both terrifying and beautiful in its scope. "This is not a weapon," Valen breathed, his crystalline form shimmering with a mixture of awe and terror. "This is a message, a key." "It is both," Sullivan said. "It is a key to understanding the nature of the universe on a level that your civilization has not yet begun to comprehend. It is also the control signal for the swarm, a signal that is not being broadcast from within our galaxy, but from somewhere beyond. The swarm is a cage, Chancellor, a vast, complex, self-repairing cage built around our galaxy to keep us in and to keep something else out." Full weight of the revelation descended upon the chamber, a silence so profound, so absolute, that it seemed to extinguish the very light in the room. Their enemy was not an enemy. Their war was not a war. Their entire struggle, their eons of history, their rise to galactic dominance, it was all a meaningless sideshow, a drama playing out on a stage that was, in itself, a prison. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were inmates, oblivious to the existence of the very walls that confined them. What could build such a thing?" Prax whispered, his jagged obsidian form seeming to shrink in on itself. "We do not know," Sullivan admitted, the first hint of uncertainty in his voice. "The signal is ancient, far older than any known civilization in this galaxy. It is a relic of a power so vast, so advanced, that we can barely begin to conceive of its scale. But we do know one thing: the signal is beginning to fail, the cage is weakening, and the swarm is a symptom of that decay, a failsafe mechanism that has gone haywire. It is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to repair the cage, and it is using the raw materials of your civilization to do it." He looked around the table, his calm, dark eyes meeting the gaze of each delegate in turn. He was no longer just an ambassador. He was a harbinger, a messenger from a reality so much larger and more complex than they had ever imagined. "This is the truth of your situation, Chancellor," he said, his voice once again calm, steady, the voice of a being who has looked into the abyss and not flinched. "Your war is over, but a much larger, much more important struggle is about to begin. The choice before you is no longer simply about survival. It is about what comes next. Do you wish to remain in your cage, to patch the walls and pretend that you are still the masters of your own destiny? Or are you ready to step outside, to face the truth of the universe, and to take your place in a much, much larger story?" For the first time since the crisis began, Valen felt a sensation that he had long thought lost to him. It was not hope, not exactly. It was something deeper, something more profound. It was awe at the sheer, terrifying, magnificent scale of it all. They had been so proud, so certain of their place in the universe, and they had been so wrong. They were children, standing at the shore of a vast, cosmic ocean, mistaking the tide pools for the sea. The humans had not just offered them a solution. They had offered them a revelation. They had peeled back the veil of their own arrogance and shown them a truth that was both humbling and exhilarating. They had been fighting a shadow, and now, for the first time, they were being shown the light. What must we do?" Valen asked, his voice filled with a new, unfamiliar emotion. It was the voice of a student, not a master, a seeker, not a ruler. Sullivan's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, a fleeting, almost imperceptible expression. "You must learn," he said. "You must set aside your old ways, your old beliefs. You must be willing to see the universe not as it appears to be, but as it truly is. And you must be prepared for the answers you find. They will not be comfortable, they will not be easy, but they will be the truth." He touched the table again, and the complex equations, the star charts, the symbols of their long, futile war all vanished. In their place, a single, simple image appeared. It was a planet. A world of blue oceans, white clouds, and green landmasses. It was a familiar image, one that the Council's archives had labeled as Sol 3, the human home world. Earth. "Our journey began here," Sullivan said, his voice soft, almost reverent. A small, fragile world teeming with life in all its chaotic, beautiful forms. We were born of conflict, of struggle, of a constant battle against our own nature. We have known despair. We have known extinction. We have faced the abyss within ourselves, and we have, through great pain and great effort, learned to overcome it. We are not a perfect species, Chancellor. Far from it. We are flawed. We are fallible. But we have one great strength, a strength that has allowed us to endure, to grow, to reach for the stars. We are not afraid to be wrong. We are not afraid to admit that we do not have all the answers. We are, above all else, a species that is willing to learn. He looked up from the image of his home world, his gaze encompassing the entire silent delegation. The first lesson begins now, he said. We are not your saviors, we are your teachers, and the first thing you must learn is that the universe is not here to be conquered. It is here to be understood, and understanding is a journey, not a destination, a journey that we must now take together. The chamber was silent, but it was a new kind of silence. It was not the silence of fear or of failure. It was the silence of contemplation, of a profound and fundamental shift in perspective. The Galactic Council had come to this place as beggars, as a dying civilization pleading for a miracle. They would leave as something else entirely. They would leave as students, as partners, as fellow travelers on a road that stretched out into an unknown, terrifying, and utterly magnificent future. In the cycles that followed, a transformation began to sweep through the galaxy. The great fleets of the Council powers were not redeployed. They were dismantled. The vast resources that had been poured into the war effort were redirected, channeled into a new, collaborative project under human guidance. Research outposts, not military bases, were established in every sector. Scientists, not soldiers, became the new heroes of the age. The Council chamber, once a theater of political posturing and arrogant debate, became a forum for learning, for the free and open exchange of ideas. The humans did not rule, they guided. They did not command, they taught. They shared their knowledge freely, their technology, their philosophy. They introduced the concept of the scientific method, of peer-reviewed research, of a culture built not on the hoarding of knowledge for power, but on the collaborative pursuit of truth for its own sake. It was a revolution not of force, but of thought, and it was far more profound than any military victory. The consuming swarm, deprived of the conflict that had fueled it, began to recede. Its advance slowed, then halted. The crimson tide that had threatened to engulf the galaxy began to dissipate, its component parts breaking down, becoming inert. The cage was still there, a faint, almost imperceptible hum in the background radiation of the cosmos, but it was no longer a threat. It was a reminder, a monument to a past that was rapidly fading into legend. Valen, in his role as High Chancellor, oversaw this transition. He watched as ancient rivalries melted away, as species that had been at war for millennia learned to work together, to share their unique perspectives, to see their differences not as a source of conflict, but as a source of strength. He saw the jagged, arrogant form of Prax soften as he became one of the galaxy's foremost experts on the non-Euclidean mathematics of the ancient. Signal, he saw the booming, aggressive voice of Gorgon quiet as he dedicated his life to the study of xenolinguistics, to the monumental task of trying to decipher the message from beyond the galactic veil. Humanity remained an enigma. They were patient, they were calm, they were unflaggingly logical. But there was a depth to them, a well of emotion and experience that the other species could only glimpse. They spoke of art, of music, of poetry, concepts that had no direct translation in the languages of many of the Council races. They mourned their dead with a quiet, profound sorrow that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. They celebrated their successes not with grand triumphs, but with quiet moments of shared reflection. They were a species of profound, unsettling, and ultimately inspiring contradictions. One cycle after the Great Transformation had begun, Valen stood with Ambassador Sullivan on the observation deck of Gateway Station. They looked out not at the sterile, minimalist corridors of the station, but at a vast, holographic representation of the galaxy, a swirling, majestic river of stars. The crimson stain of the swarm was gone, replaced by a complex, interconnected web of light, each point representing a research outpost, a collaborative project, a beacon of the new age of discovery. "You have given us a great gift, Ambassador," Valen said, his crystalline form shimmering with a serene internal light. "You have not just saved our lives, you have saved our souls. You have shown us a better way to be." "We showed you the only way that endures, Chancellor," Sullivan replied, his gaze fixed on the shimmering starscape. "Power based on domination is an illusion. It is a flame that consumes itself. The only true power, the only power that can stand the test of eternity is the power of understanding, the power of unity. He reached out and touched the holographic display, his fingers tracing the faint, almost invisible outline of the great cage that still surrounded them. "Our work is not done," he said, his voice soft but filled with a quiet, unshakable resolve. This is just the beginning. The message from beyond is not a warning, it is an invitation. An invitation to join a conversation that has been going on for eons, a conversation between minds so vast, so ancient, that we are but whispers in the wind to them. He turned to face Valen, and for the first time the Chancellor saw something in the human's eyes that was not calmness, not logic, but a fierce, burning, unquenchable fire. It was the fire of curiosity, the fire of the explorer, the fire of a species that had looked into the endless, terrifying darkness of the void and seen not an enemy to be feared, but a frontier to be crossed. "The Galactic Council has failed, Chancellor," Sullivan said, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. "But the galactic community has just been born, and our first great act, our first journey together will be to step outside this room, to open the door, and to say hello." The image of the galaxy faded, replaced by the stark, terrifying, beautiful image of the void between the galaxies, a vast, empty canvas of infinite possibility. And in the distance, a single, impossibly faint point of light, a light that was not a star, a light that was not a galaxy, a light that was something else, a destination, a beginning, the next step in a journey that had just truly begun. And for the first time in his long, long life, Valen, the last High Chancellor of a fallen galactic council and the first speaker for a new galactic community, felt the thrill of true, unadulterated, and absolutely glorious fear. The universe was so much bigger than he had ever dreamed, and he, along with his new, strange, and utterly remarkable human friends, was finally ready to explore it. The age of empires was over. The age of discovery was at hand. And the silence of the void was not an ending, but the sound of a new and infinitely more profound conversation waiting to begin.